We use maps every single day. 1.5 billion cars around the world. What's the first thing you do when you get into a car? You open a map. Well, what if everyday drivers like you and I could contribute data to that very map every time we drive to the grocery store and get paid to do it? That's exactly what Hivemapper is doing. Today, we're joined by Ariel Seidman, CEO and co-founder of Hivemapper. In this thought-provoking interview, we discussed the power of token incentive mechanisms and why Hivemapper is only possible on-chain, how Hivemapper's Honey token has incentivized 10,000 drivers to install a Hivemapper dashcam and map 10% of the world's roads in just 1 year, why the world needs better maps. We also briefly talk about what it's been like to be in the Solana ecosystem from their lows a year ago to their incredible highs today. This is Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. We are here to make sense of an on-chain world in constant transformation. I'm Jay Bird, your host for today's episode, and I believe that DePIN is going to change the world. GM Ariel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, before we jump in, I'm super excited to talk all about Hivemapper, but I've got to ask first, what's it like being in Solana right now? We often use the analogy that a blockchain is like a country, and I'm in Canada, and when Canada does well, then the whole country does well. Everyone's excited. There's a lot of energy. Solana is doing great right now. Tokens doing great. Lots of projects doing great. A lot of attention. Is there been a shift in maybe the last few months that you've seen in terms of being in that ecosystem and how that's impacted you on the day-to-day or the business?
It hasn't impacted me, to be transparent. I'm just happy for the Solana team. Like, a lot of those people, they got beaten up pretty hard, last year.
Yeah.
And those guys, some people would respond to that in a very negative way and either give up in the worst case scenario or just let it get to them so they couldn't make forward progress. And so that team, I think, as a whole, really just, started to grind out and day by day improve things, fight some of the FUD, provide better tools to the community members like Hivemapper projects and others. And I think they just never forgot that they exist to serve projects, right? They need applications being built on that. And they said, what is in the best interest, right? How do we provide more value, more utility, better ecosystem to applications so that those applications can thrive? And if those applications thrive, then we in turn will thrive. To me, I think it's just a great example of customer focus, right? Like, at the end of the day, for better or for worse, Hivemapper has to be happy with Solana as a great platform, as a great ecosystem. And if we are, then, we have no reason to switch, and we don't have any reason to switch. And, that was true a year ago when they were dealing with a whole set of challenges, and it's still true today.
It's so great to hear. It's also just so interesting. A lot of projects that I've spoken to have been affected, which I think says something about what you are building at Hivemapper. You've got a roadmap, you've got a plan, and you're just in execution mode. In the end, being part of that ecosystem, I'm sure, is nice and maybe has brought a little bit of extra attention towards you as a result, but it doesn't change your game plan because, quite frankly, you're not an NFT project that's just trying to get a bunch of attention right now and then figure out what they're building later, which, for better or for worse, is a lot of the businesses that we see in this space.
Yeah, I think that whole period of time, I don't call it probably Q1 of 2022 up until a month or two ago, was very painful, but very necessary for the crypto community as a whole, where, I think it forced people to get serious about, we got to build things that everyday normal people really want to use. The name of the game can't be speculation. Speculation is a business model. I mean, look, it exists. It's existed for a long, long time, right? People speculating on commodities of all types, but that's not the end all be all, right? You're not going to change the world that way. And so I think it's been a very healthy process where people who were just in it for pure speculation and nothing more have kind of get pushed out. And then people who are here to actually build things that are useful and new kinds of things are still around, and they're still grinding it out. And it's great.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's talk about the new and exciting things that you're building. I want to go back though first. You started your career, I actually don't know if this is where you started your career, but previously you worked on the Yahoo Maps team, on their product team. And then you went and you co-founded a mobile tech startup focused on mapping solutions. And now you've founded Hivemapper, a decentralized mapping solution, which we'll get to. Did you always love maps? Did you like the crossover between maps and tech? How did this career happen?
Yeah, I was definitely like one of those kids who had National Geographic on my shelves and was always opening it up to the map section. And so, yeah, just like from a young age, just that took to me. And I was always like one of these kids that would like, when we go on road trips or just riding around town. I grew up in Chicago mostly. And I would, try to like memorize the names of streets and directions and all this kind of stuff. And so it's like my brain just is very much oriented that way. People's brains are oriented certain ways, right? Some people are really good with words. Some people are very good at math. I'm very good spatially, and it's easy for me and it speaks to me and I like it. But yeah, once I start to get into, at Yahoo, I started in the search team, right? So search is how do you crawl and organize the world's information. Of that, maps is a very large segment of information data that's constantly changing. And so, just because of my prior aptitude and interest in maps, that's kind of like where I ultimately navigated to once I was within the search team. But no, I wasn't like out of college. I knew exactly I was going to work on maps and like it was definitely not like that at all. And that's okay. I think like you kind of go through these processes and journeys. But then, yeah, once I started to work on maps, I was like, wow, it is crazy. And what was happening at the time was Google was starting to really build and scale out their mapping operation. And they were collecting their own data and so forth. And I started to just see how expensive it was. And if you kind of just followed that logic through, what was going to happen was, because it was so expensive, very few people, companies, even governments could afford to build a really high quality map. So I always felt like if you could figure out a way to marshal everybody around the world to go and help you build a map, you could actually build it much more cost effectively. Now, the trick has always been is that you got to do it at a level that's high enough quality, which that it's actually useful for a lot of use cases. So you obviously have things like OpenStreetMap and others. The problem sometimes with those maps is the quality bar is fairly low for a lot of reasons. And so the number of use cases that you can actually apply it to is relatively small. So you can't really like make a lot of money off of it. And so you have to be able to like pass a certain quality bar or threshold such that you can do it, and also crowdsource or leverage all the people around the world to help you go build the map. And that's kind of this like magical, very, very challenging recipe that you have to create. And if you can do that, then you can do something amazing. So that's on the business, the more on the product technology side. From a business perspective, it was very infuriating to see a lot of companies get built on the backs of other people's data and really not really share any of the economic upside associated with those incredible data platforms that were getting created. Waze is a great example. And I want to make something clear. I don't think Waze lied to anybody. I think the way they went about their business was very ethical, but fundamentally the entire mapping industry was always, and other industries as well, it was like people just like give their hand over their data, and there was like no expectation that, wait, we're building something here that is worth billions upon billions of dollars. I should get some of that, It shouldn't be like free. And a lot of these people, if you look at, there's a Wall Street Journal article from like 2018 where they interviewed all these like Waze map editors. They were like 20 or 30,000 of them. And these people like dedicated many, many hours per day editing these maps, to the extent that their spouses or wives, whatever, would be like, what are you doing?
This isn't a job. This isn't a paid job. This is just out of, it's gamified. So you did it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that, I think now people are savvy enough with technology and these data platforms where they're like, wait, I'm actually contributing something here that is very useful and valuable to the entire map as a whole, right? Like if we all do this, like we're going to build something that's very valuable. I mean, look, even though OpenStreetMap, right? And OpenStreetMap is like the Wikipedia of maps in some ways. It's run into some problems recently, but it definitely like achieved scale for sure. But even there, it's like, wait, like you have all these people like working at it and editing it and improving it. And then other companies use that data for free, and then they go and make a lot of money.
Right.
Like we're talking about like Amazon, going and using OpenStreetMap for free, 100%, right? And Amazon is not doing anything illegal. And then they turn around and integrate it with AWS and some of the other products. And so that's where it's unfortunate that was the case for a long time. And yeah, I think we can start to change that.
And so is blockchain the big difference maker here? Obviously AI is as well, and there's some aspects of that, but could you build what you're building at Hivemapper without blockchain?
You could, is a short version. We tried, and we were paying cash before we were paying people in crypto and people in honey. There's a couple problems with it. The first problem is that it's a transaction cost problem. So if you're trying to pay people in Nigeria $100, $150, or even $20, whatever it is, or Manila, whatever, the transaction fees associated with sending USD to them is atrocious, right? The time associated with it is ridiculous. So, I mean, people will be like, oh, we have digital dollar. No, we don't. So that's number one. And those people, by the way, to be really, clear, they would ask us, can you send us crypto? And this is like before crypto was as big as it is now. So they were being asked, especially the people in Manila, they're like, it's easier if you send me crypto because then I can actually like pay for gas like the next day, right? Whereas even if you send me cash, I have to wait 3 or 4 or 5 days, whatever it was. And that sometimes I go down to my bank and get it. I mean, it's just very complicated. I think that was one, which is transaction. The other is that people just didn't trust us, right? They're like, wait, how do you know, like, this person's not getting scammed? Is this legit? Whatever. By putting all the rewards onto the blockchain, it's all there. It's all transparent. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust Hivemapper. It's there, right? And you see people all the time talking about it on Twitter, Discord, whatever it is. And they're pointing to different reward transactions in terms of how much they mapped and how much they got rewarded. So it's all there. It's great. And it's trustworthy. The other piece is that when we were paying cash, there was like no passion in the system. It was like a very coin operated. There was no like people who were in it because they wanted to build something of, massive economic value that could change the world and all that. And so you were missing that energy, that passion in the community that now exists because it was all cash operated, right? It was like, oh yeah, pay me whatever. And some people would be like, they would have their dash cam and it'd be like looking up at the sky and you could see no road and we wouldn't pay them. And we'd get like all pissy, like, you're cheating. We're not mapping the sky. We're mapping roads. And do you see any roads here? Whereas today in Hivemapper, people are helping each other ensure that their mounts are good so that the overall map is really of high quality, right? Because they know that it's not just about them, it's about the entire community. And so they want to make sure that like all the other mounts are well positioned. It's just that the quality of the map is really, really good. It's just that people want to use the map, right? And so you just start to think very differently about it because you're incentivized and motivated to create something that is really great that customers want. You want to help the next person.
Yeah, it's truly unprecedented, the incentive mechanisms that are possible as a result of blockchain. And I think we're all starting to see that, but it's still so early. It's incredible the power of community when everybody believes in the same thing and has incentive to put in that extra effort, such as help somebody out that, just needs a little help with mounting their dash cam. Okay, I want to just explain quickly how Hivemapper works for all of our listeners so everyone understands. So give us the rundown. I've heard you explain it so well before of how you'd explain Hivemapper to somebody who hasn't heard of it before.
Yeah, so very simple. So we're building a map. You go and you buy one of these 2 dash cams from us. There's one that's $300, and then there's one that's a little bit pricier, like $550. You install the dash cam. It takes you about 5 minutes to install the dash cam into your car, and then you just drive like you normally drive, right? So we don't want people like only driving for Hivemapper. We don't want you going out on the road specifically for Hivemapper. Just if you're already out on the road, awesome. This is a great addition to your drive. The imagery offloads from the dash cam to Hivemapper. Then there's a system called Map AI. Map AI is effectively extracting out from the imagery all of the objects that you see around you every single day, right? So, hey, there's a construction. The construction work zone is impacting 2 of the 3 lanes. It starts here, it ends there. There's a 35 mile per hour speed limit sign. There's a 20 mile per hour speed limit sign for a school zone. There's no left-hand turn here between these hours. All that kind of information. That's the data that actually makes a map, right? And so there's these map AI trainers that are then training the map AI to get better and better and better at its job, right? And so there's all these different kind of fun games that you can play online. Some of them are quite challenging because it makes it a little bit more fun. And so there's about, 10,000 or so people who are doing that on a daily basis. And then ultimately, we now have these great data products that we then turn around and we sell to businesses. So unbeknownst to most people, if you never use Google Maps, what I tell people is if you never use Google Maps, you are still interacting with Google Maps as you go about your day, right? You open up Lyft, you open up Uber, you go to a FedEx website. If you work at FedEx, if you work at Uber, if you work in the US government, if you work at a real estate company, if you work at a financial services company, whatever, right? Like you are interacting with maps and location data, whether you know it or not. And all of that data is being paid for, right? So the biggest player in that market is definitely Google Maps. I know companies that pay them $35 million a year, right? And that's like not, it's a lot, but there are companies that pay them more. So it's a large business. There are basically 3 big markets that we're attacking. The first 2 that we're operating in right now, which is businesses, millions of businesses use it. The second one is more nascent, but this is basically autonomous driving. Now, there's a whole range of autonomous driving from something which is like a full robo-taxi, like a Cruise or like a Waymo, right? All the way down to like Ford's product, which is called Blue Cruise. That's basically advanced driver systems. It will drive for you in certain roads at certain times of day and all that kind of stuff. So all of those would definitely benefit from maps like ours that are incredibly fresh. And that market is nascent, but it's very interesting because customers are willing to pay for it, right? So in other words, Ford Blue Cruise product is not free. You're paying an annual subscription to that product because you need to, it's not like a car, like, okay, the car's engine has to work for you, right? It's an on-off switch. But with a ADAS system, the expectation is, one, it has to be maintained, right? And the expectation is that it's constantly improving and expanding.
Right. Yeah.
And so consumers in their mind are willing to pay a subscription fee for something that needs to be maintained, improved, and expanded upon. And so that's why you're seeing them adopt and pay for. And so that's great because we're a key ingredient into those systems. And so we're looking forward to the growth of that market. The third market, which we don't yet play in, is really the consumer navigation experience. So this would be something that's like competitive to like a Waze or something like that. That will take more years to develop all the layers of the map so that we can potentially compete in there. But it is interesting because today when you're using something like a Waze, you hit a button that says, hey, there's construction here, there's a cop here, whatever it is. They don't immediately believe you, right? They have to wait for a lot of people to then confirm that.
Right.
And so it depends on your rating and a bunch of other factors in terms of whatever, a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas the dash cam sees it, you don't have to believe. I mean, the dash cam is the image. It's right there, right? And we can tell you immediately what's going on and we can tell you the impact of it. So we won't just tell you this construction. We'll tell you the impact of that construction on navigation. Okay, 1 out of the 3 lanes are closed or 2 out of the 3 lanes are closed. That's a lot more actionable and it's a lot faster. And so I do think that we can demonstrate some new capabilities when it comes to navigation that the world hasn't seen yet.
So just to get a scope here, what is the size of the map data market?
So I'll work backwards from the navigation.
I guess each of those 3 has their own market basically,
exactly,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So the first one, navigation, anywhere between like $20 to $30 billion a year.
Wow.
Google's is has 18 to 20 billion of that. The second one is smaller, but it's growing quickly. It's probably the fastest. I mean, there's 1.5 billion cars on the road, and there's 70 million new cars that are basically shipped every single year. Of those 70 million, let's say 10 million have the right sensors to be able to provide those types of products, right? So you see this coming online. We're at the very early stages. It's already in the billions. It will only get bigger as time goes on. So the critical thing is if you can get there in the early stages and kind of grow with the industry and the industry. So that's kind of the stage we're at right now. And then the last one, which is the B2B, you're selling to millions of businesses. That's probably the most mature, right? And so that's also probably 8 to 10 billion a year.
Okay. So
The second one will be the largest, to be very clear. By far.
yeah. Yeah, it's just that the hardware is not there yet on most cars on the road, but it's coming. And right now, how many drivers have the Hivemapper dash cam, and what are the results? How much of the world have you mapped?
Yeah, so let's see. In 1 year since launch, we've mapped about a little over 10% of the world's roads. So I think we're coming up on 7 million unique road kilometers. But that's actually a little bit more. That's about 12% of the world's roads in 1 year. So that's like unheard of, like in terms of the rate of growth, quite fast. That number will just continue to grow. Like it's actually we've accelerated the growth of unique road kilometers, which is really hard to do, right? Because as a road can only be unique once, right?
Yeah.
Once you've seen it, it's not unique. I mean, it still needs to be refreshed, but it just becomes harder and harder to find, roads that are not unique. And yet we've still gone from 6 to 7 million faster than we went from 5 to 6. So it's accelerating. That is testament to a lot of new people jumping in, buying dash cams.
Okay.
I don't know. We're back ordered now pretty substantially. I think publicly we're, till May. We're trying to change that.
I think a lot of our listeners are going to be looking to purchase a dash cam after this episode. So be patient, everybody. It's not a bad thing that they're back ordered. Everything's going well.
Yeah. So the name of the game is there's certain parts of the world where, like, let's take Europe, for example. We've done very well in places like Lisbon and Amsterdam and,
Right.
Madrid, whatever. But now we want to get further into the secondary market. So this would be like a Marseille, France, Genoa, Italy, like those kinds of places. And then even there's certain parts of Asia, right, where we may have okay coverage, but not amazing, like a New Delhi or Jakarta or whatever. So that's also. But look, a lot of that stuff will just kind of happen naturally and organically. The other aspect of this is maintaining freshness predictability. What I mean by that is, look, there are certain parts of Phoenix, Arizona now that we see 180 times a year. For context, Google Street View sees that location maybe every 12 months once.
Wow.
So we're just seeing a given location a lot more. But what we want predictability of the freshness cadence. So what I mean by that is, okay, that given location in Scottsdale, Arizona, or in Phoenix, Arizona, we see it at least twice a week, right? Take a given location in the Phoenix metro area, 95% of them, we're seeing them at least once or twice a week, okay? Then you have predictability, right? Because a lot of customers are like, well, it's great that you can see this place in Scottsdale, Arizona 180 times, but if you saw it all within a 3-month period and not throughout the 12 months, that's not as good, right? Well, that's kind of like the next level, is that predictability about the refresh cadence.
How many dash cams total in the network?
There's now, they're not all active, but there's about 20,000.
Okay.
We shipped about 12,000. And then there's probably like another 8 to 10,000 are on back order.
And this would be split between a regular driver, just anybody who's interested in supporting the project. Would commercial fleets be involved? Rideshare, gig drivers, they are also involved. I guess it's a kind of across all those categories of drivers.
Yeah. I mean, look, it just by definition, an Uber driver, Lyft driver is going to do a lot better than somebody like myself.
Totally. Yeah.
And so if you know a Lyft driver, Uber driver, Amazon Flex driver, all those kinds of folks that are out on the road, they work because that's their job, then this is a great fit for them. And we definitely have a lot of those. We're very thankful to that community. And look, it's also, what we hear from them oftentimes is like, especially with the S model, which has a lot of the features that they want just inside of a dash cam for security purposes. If they get into an accident, like if they get into an accident, right, and it's not their fault, they want evidence of that because they don't want their insurance rates skyrocketing. If their insurance skyrocket, that could be with them for like 2-3 years. And that's just eating into their annual or monthly income. So they want it for that purpose, 100%. But then I think there's a sense of it's fun, right? Like you see, at the end of the day or end of the week, you see like what you mapped and how much you helped contribute to the map. And so you feel like you're just a part of something that is bigger. So you have a sense of purpose. And the community is kind of fun. It's kind of ruckus at times as well. So you can kind of jump in there and it's fun.
And what would be the rewards that somebody might get for, can you give me an example?
Okay, so this is there are some people who come into Hivemapper thinking that you get, X number of honey tokens for every single kilometer that you do. And it's fixed and it's the same everywhere. That's not the case at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, I tell people, if there's a system that presents that to you, you should run away this fast, because they will never build a map that's useful, right? Because everyone will just attach it to a bus or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And just go the same thing. They'll never have any coverage. They'll never have any freshness, right? And they'll be very fresh on a couple bus routes. So it is very dependent upon which region of the world you're mapping in, and then your driving patterns, right? But if you're in a good region of the world, right? I mean, when we say good region of the world, what do we really mean? It was where's economic activity happen, right? There's a lot more economic activity in a place like Amsterdam or Seoul than there is in some random little city in Indiana. Right. And so, you will definitely make more. And then the other factor is that if the region is progressing well, so in other words, there's enough drivers who are helping move it towards complete coverage, and you will start to earn more than if the region was just like you and one other person and it was never going to reach a level of actual true 100% coverage. So there's a lot of factors in there. But yeah, in general, I mean, I haven't looked at this closely, but I think a good driver who's driving fairly diverse frequently, I think per week they were doing 1,200 to 1,600 honey tokens, but my data on that could be a little bit dated, so don't quote me on that. I'd have to go back and get better information.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, you brought up a good point in that there is utility in a dash cam for itself. So you don't join Hivemapper, this isn't going to become your full-time paying job just driving around mapping the roads, right? You're doing this while you're doing your regular life, whether that be an Uber driver or whether that just be you're driving your kid to soccer practice, whatever it might be, and you're getting token rewards based upon how much you're on the road. And I think this is true of a lot of deep in projects, that the rewards are great and there's definitely incentive there, and that's important. But it's just as much about being a part of building decentralized infrastructure and a belief in that. And that's sort of where I want to lead to next is I want to talk about the current solutions that we have for mapping. And I mean, you've used the word freshness a lot. It's a word that comes up quite a bit. And I'm guessing that is one thing that a decentralized system can offer that a centralized system can't offer. But I'm guessing there's also other reasons why a decentralized mapping system is a better long-term solution for the world than Google owning 70% of our mapping infrastructure and having complete control of it.
Yeah, so if you're talking to a customer, what do they go through, right? It does start with coverage at the end of the day. You have to have a really meaningful amount of coverage. We've definitely hit that at this point now, where we can talk, there's a lot of companies, they won't even talk to you. If you only have 500,000 or 1 million unique road kilometers, they're not going to spend the time talking to you, right? Well, it's not worth it. Yeah, we've definitely reached that point. So it's you get enough coverage. The second thing is quality, right? Is the quality there? Then it comes to freshness. So then it's okay, what's your frequency of seeing a given location? Are you fresh enough? And there's a whole wide range of use cases. Some need very, very fresh. Some need a little bit less. And so there's different varieties in there. I think the world, I mean, look, would anybody say, I want news that is less fresh, right? Everyone wants breaking news, right? Does anyone ever say, hey, I don't want my package delivered at quite as quickly as that, right? Slow down the delivery of
right.
And so nobody also says, I want a map that hasn't been updated recently. Again, nobody says that. And if you say to them, would you want a map that's more recently updated or one that has only seen whatever a given street in San Francisco a year and a half ago, it's very obvious what the answer to that is. And so that is crucial, right? If you just talk to mapping people, that is really the most critical thing. And in our case, the vector that we're competing aggressively on and where we have a massive, massive advantage. I mean, look, I think there's other things here. This kind of speaks a little bit to the macro. I think there's two other interesting ideas. So one is there are behind the scenes conversations that you and I never get exposed to, where the government name your government calls up Google and says, we don't like the way that you drew these boundaries in your maps. That needs to change. If you want to continue to do business in our country, that needs to change. right? Or we don't even like the way that when you open up the map, that city at this zoo level that we don't like is being displayed before our capital city. So you need to change the labeling order of which cities appear when you're opening up the map. And,
I can see that for sure.
we're never exposed to any of that. All those changes that are happening, I mean, obviously, like, the people at Google are good people. The people at Apple are good people. And, I think they fight back, right, as much as they can. But at the end of the day, if you want to sell, Google ads and Google search, and you want to, sell iPhones or whatever in this country, you operate in that.
Yeah, you're going to agree with them on those small.
Yeah. And, I know for a fact that, like, a lot of the people who work at Google and Apple, like, aren't very happy with, that. But those conversations happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be open and transparent about that. And so I think it would be very interesting, if we put the boundaries of all the different countries and cities and stuff like that onto the blockchain. If there are changes to those happen openly and transparently.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just these like backroom conversations that happen between the government of a certain country and a big tech company. It's like, no, like, here's the boundaries. And if there's changes to them, then everyone will see. So I think that's pretty interesting. I think in terms of just the economics of these systems, and we talked about this a little bit, which is with Google, you have no economic upside. You are helping them build their map. Day in, day out, you are helping them build their map and maintain their map and all that. And you have zero economic upside. They know everywhere you go to a bar, you go to a strip club, you go anywhere, they know it, right? I don't think that's a very good world to live in, right? Where like one company knows all of this information about you, where you go, what you do, and then they just like use your data to like basically improve their products for free, right? And so I think the world does need an independent mapping company that is being governed and run by the people who actually are building these maps, right? There's only one human species that needs maps, and that's us. Yeah, right. Well, so I think the people who actually like use these things day in, day out, and in most cases are the ones building them, right? Because we should be the ones who are effectively the primary beneficiaries of that, versus a Google shareholder.
And when you say, are honey holders given governance opportunities right now?
Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that it's a relatively small set of people who have it, but they all are honey token holders. So It's not like you can come in and you can just start voting.
Anybody yet?
Yeah, we don't have that yet, to be clear.
That's okay. You can't start there. Anybody who started with everybody gets a vote fails.
Yeah. So yeah, I think now that the system is becoming, more mature, more successful, and it's very clear, like in the community, who are the thoughtful people, right? That I think it makes sense to start to say, okay, there's a guy in the Hivemapper community, his name is Meiji, and just, I don't always agree with him, but he's thoughtful, right? He can weigh all of the different trade-offs and talk about, okay, here's the pros and cons of this approach, or the pros and cons of this approach, or whatever it is. And that's interesting. That's a lot more interesting than someone just comes in and is like, how do I get more honey tokens? How do I get more honey? Well, okay, let's start with the customer, right? Let's start with what does the customer need? What's the utility? What's the value that's being created here? And then we kind of work our way backwards to, okay, how does that, whatever. Yeah, so people like Meiji have got to figure out some way to start to kind of build that part out more robustly, so that they can have a greater voice. He already has a pretty big voice because everyone like kind of looks up to him in the community, and he's considered trustworthy, and he has a podcast that he does outside of Hivemapper where he's sharing his opinion. He runs a fleet. I think he has like 70 drivers or something like that. Don't quote me on that. He knows the problems intimately himself. And so I think, yeah, we're at that point where that will start to happen, where individuals who have kind of demonstrated that they have the best interests of the network at heart. And he's like very sober about this. He's like, look, the way you actually create value here is you get customers. Like, end of story.
He's a businessman at heart for sure. This is the tough thing of building with community, is you also have a business to run. And we've seen that a lot in this space where the NFT mania and the ICO mania really led us down a dangerous path because a lot of people thought magic internet money, we can just print money everywhere and create value, but it doesn't work that way. You've got to go create a business and sell to customers and give them a product that they want. And that is obviously very important too. And community members, a lot of them, especially in the crypto space, degens can be number go up only, and that's all I want to see. So that balance is a challenging balance. But the interesting thing about deep-in projects is in a deep-in project, I am, as a community member, also giving to the project in some way, right? I am giving data, I am giving resources, giving my access to my dash cam by driving around. That's why I'm so bullish on deep-in projects. Like, I get very excited about these because it is a different relationship than we've seen in the past, which, as you said, it's the more typical Google Apple relationship. You get my data and you just take it for whatever economic benefit you want, and I have zero gain. And I quite frankly don't even really know. I'm kind of in the dark.
Yeah. Look, I think everything you said is 100% true. I'll caveat it if I can add two additional parts to it. So one is that, look, there are still people in the deep end projects that just want to see numbers go up. They're contributors. They don't give a shit about like the customer. They don't give a shit about a lot. I don't know, sorry if I can curse, but hopefully their voices get drowned out by more sober, thoughtful people. But the reality is that those people do exist. And I always tell folks, I was like, look, if you get involved in a deep end project, you really got to understand what is the product on the other side that is going to generate revenue. Because I'm basically a worker, right? Helping create something that's useful, right? Through this driving or my dash cam or whatever I'm doing. And if I don't believe that there is some valuable service and product that people are willing to purchase, you should not get involved, right? End of story. Or if you just feel like, hey, this is like too wide open, right? Like a lot of times I see these deep in projects and it's like, we'll do this and this, and we'll get into this market and we'll get into this market. Like if you're going after 4 different markets that are totally different, you're not going after any market.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there may be some adjacencies in the future, but like, what's your market right now, today, where you're going to have a product that is useful and competitive and better than the alternative? I see a lot of that right now, quite frankly. It's a little bit scary, right? Because I think we got to be very, very careful with deep in my view, because if 1 or 2 of these projects go sideways, then it's negative for the entire category. And so that's why I'm trying to basically tell people, as much as they'll listen, like, hey, let's really understand like what is sustainable here, right? And what is sustainable is like what we've been talking about is having real customers. If you're going to have real customers, then you got to be in a real market, right? And if you got to have something that is actually differentiated. And I still see like way too much of like a hand waving, right? Blah, 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 blah. I was like, if I don't know what you're talking about, then I don't know. Like that's a problem.
So are there any deep in projects that you are excited about that are either happening right now or coming up soon?
Well, look, I think what Helium's done on the mobile side specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the IoT market is just not that big.
Not yet.
Yeah. It could be big and like there's not existing sensors that are already integrated into like hundreds of millions, billions of devices. Whereas the cellular, like there's already a chipset. They don't have to like go ask hardware companies to go, build a chipset into the thing. Yeah, I think on the mobile side, obviously a very competitive market, but I think there's a ton of demand, and it's much clearer like how you can grow that into a big business for them. So that one I'm very excited about. The one that I haven't seen, but I would love to see is decentralized energy.
Okay.
If you can start to say, and I know there's like a very it would have to be somebody who came from the regulated energy industry. But look, I mean, I pay, I live in California, so I pay PG&E a lot of money per month, right? And it would be, obviously I'm looking for a cost reduction there, but I'm also looking for something that is more local energy production, right? So it'd be really cool if like my community, like even my neighborhood, could produce energy and then share energy with one another. That would be really fascinating. Right, because it's local, so it's like easier to transport that energy to me.
Yeah,
it's probably a little bit more reliable as well, and obviously just more cost effective.
Yeah, and that presumably would come through solar Solar is the one that comes up for me. Wind feels like it would be only for certain locations, and wind also feels much more expensive on the hardware side, although I'm not an energy expert by any means.
Yes, solar by far is the biggest one, right? And I mean, it's already happening, right? Where it's like, hey, look, maybe you're going to install some solar, install a slightly larger array on your house, and then start to share it amongst your community. And so you put, 20% or 30% or whatever it is, or maybe you're away for the summer, partial of the summer, you put in 100%. And so that's all up to you in terms of how much you want to give over to this decentralized energy community. So I think something like that it's hard, but is it valuable?
Yeah, fascinating. I feel like one of the things that we need, which Hivemapper is leading the way on, is just examples of DeepHim projects that have done both build the community and built a product that is sustainable and has a profitable business, because it's very difficult to do both. And we've seen multiple examples where you try to do one, but you can't do the other. I mean, you said it yourself, right? It's a big red flag. So once we have more of those models, there will be more people who go out and try. But I hope if anyone's listening and you're in the energy sector and you want to go do this, hit us up, because I'd love to see somebody take on that project.
Yeah, I would too. I met an entrepreneur and very talented guy, and I haven't caught up with him in about a year, but I hope he figures it out. I mean, I think he's the right kind of background to figure it out.
Cool. Okay, we've talked about Hivemapper dash cams. So if any of our listeners are interested in getting involved in Hivemapper, you can purchase dash cam, $300 to $500. We're going to put a link in the show notes to check it out. This isn't a sponsored promo or anything like that. I just really believe in supporting the Hivemapper project. I think this is a great project. We talked briefly about Hivemapper AI, Map AI trainers. Maybe just go back to that, actually. We didn't talk a ton about that, but that's another cool way that people can get involved in the project. Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. For that, you don't need a dash cam. You can just open up a web browser, you find the Map AI trainers section on our website, and then just sign up and start training the AI system. And you're basically, there's these little games. And so we'll say, hey, we think there's a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit sign. Tell us whether or not that's correct, right? Hey, we think this turn restriction sign is located here. We'll place it on a satellite-based map. Tell us whether or not that is correct, right? And so then they'll try to inspect the imagery, check the satellite. This is actually a little bit more like detective work. It's kind of fun.
Okay.
So if you're into GeoGuessr and those types of games, this is a little bit like that. That is another kind of games, but there's probably 15 to 20 different types of games.
Right. And those are also token incentives.
Yeah.
Token rewards.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And then tell us a bit about Open Road Season 2 that is happening right now. I think it started a month ago, or I think it started in December. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, so we have these campaigns, so there's open roads, all these kind of different ways to grow the map and also have fun while we're doing it, right? Mm-hmm. And so the first season was, all right, let's get to 6 million unique road kilometers, which is 10% of the world's roads as fast as we can, right? So there was all these kind of fun different incentives, and we ran these different campaigns and whatever, this was during the summer, so people take road trips and stuff like that during the summer. So it's kind of fun to get out into these different parts of the world that, we usually don't travel to. So there was some incentives behind this. This, for season 2, it's how do we get more dash cams out into the world and into the right places in the world, right? So basically, there's a referral system built into it where you're kind of helping refer your friends. And as you refer your friends, you're earning honey tokens along the way. And, this really speaks to, we don't necessarily need another 500 dash cams in Amsterdam, right? Amsterdam has done quite well. But geez, we would really like to get into a Marseille, France, or a Nice, France, or, some of these smaller secondary and tertiary cities. Help us get there, right? And, we have customers right now who, hey, we want everything you have in the EU, but we see that, Marseille, you don't have as much, or Genoa, you don't have as much, right? The world is a very big place, it turns out. So that's really the spirit behind Open Road Season 2 is give people a little bit more incentive to bring their friends on as dashcam contributors and give them a little bit of an incentive and a nudge to do that.
Mm-hmm. But obviously there is already an incentive, as you said. If I am the only person living in my community with a dash cam, then I most likely won't get very much rewards because there's not much value in the product, the data that I'm giving. Whereas if there's hundreds of people in my community, there's going to be more of a product that can be offered. So there's that incentive as well, clearly.
There is, yeah. I mean, there's kind of like, it's multi-layered, right? Yeah. So it's at the regional level, there's obviously at the global level. This is a little bit more like help us sell more dash cams. It's kind of funny because like when we launched it, I mean, obviously this helped drive dash cam sales, but there were some other things that also helped drive. Now we're dealing with like this massive back ordered list. So I was actually out in our manufacturing facility, which is not in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I flew in, it was like a quick trip, but really to try to figure out how do we increase production.
Okay.
And so for those of you who've ever built hardware, you know this, but every single station, how do you make that station a little bit more automated, make that station a little bit faster, even the boxes, right? We're looking at boxes and basically being like, okay, how do we optimize the box design such that it just takes less time to fold the box up and package it, right? So each one of these like little steps goes into like, how do you scale a mapping network?
It's one of the things about any DPIM project that I do not envy is the hardware side. It's one thing to build a tech company and the software company, but to also build a hardware company at the same time, I have a lot of respect for your patience in that process. It's
Well, look, we tried doing it with the iPhone and Android, the smartphone, right? It didn't work as a short version. And it didn't work for a couple of reasons. One is that customers hated the data product. What do I mean by that? Like, if you have an Android and I have an Android, they're probably not the same imager, right? If they're not the same imager, then they don't have the same camera intrinsics. And they don't have the same camera intrinsics, then from a computer vision perspective, that becomes very, very challenging. Also, just like for the human, I mean, putting aside computer vision, just for the human eye, they're all different sizes and shapes and resolutions and all that kind of stuff, right? The same thing is true for iPhones over the years, camera specs, etc. That's issue number one. Issue number two is that when you put your phone, so every time you get into the car, right, you have to mount your phone, unmount it, and then you have to open up the app and hit record or play or start mapping, whatever it is. If you're just going for pizza and then you come out or you grab a cup of coffee, like you're not going to, exactly. You're like, I got to go to my next thing or whatever it is. Like people are busy. They're not going to sit there and do that for very long. So our churn rates were just horrible. And then for people who were mapping in like warmer climates, like a Phoenix, Arizona or something like that, they would just overheat. So then the phone would overheat, then they get freaking pissed off, understandably so. Like, my phone overheated.
You ruined my phone.
Yeah, you ruined my phone. I can't use it now for the next hour. I have to wait for it to cool down, so I can't use maps or I can't listen to music. This sucks. And they're like, screw it, I'm not doing it anymore.
Right.
And so it was a bad experience overall. And we just were like, we got to build it, And then we tried a third-party dash cam. And then we're like, now this isn't working for a whole variety of reasons. Then we just had to go build our own.
So you tried everything you could first before building your own, and then came to the unwanted conclusion that the only way to do this was build your own hardware.
Yeah, I mean, it would kind of be if you build your own dash cam and then you realize, holy shit, I could have used a phone or something like, and it would be
way worse.
Yeah, it'd be like way worse, exactly. So you definitely want to exhaust all your options before you commit to something that big. Our churn rates are incredibly low, and our average driver productivity is like 600 to like 900 kilometers per week.
Wow.
And so you just have like a very committed supply base, of drivers. And you also have, many of these people are like professional drivers or commercial drivers, right? And so they're just doing a ton. So yeah, it's worked out. I mean, I remember there was an investor who was like, I'm going to pass on you because I don't think your hardware thing is going to scale. And I was like, I think you're wrong. Sometimes I'm tempted to like reply to that email now, being like, here's a unique road kilometers.
Yeah.
But I'm bigger than that. I'm bigger than
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, I wouldn't do to that level, but sometimes
investing is hard, right? So like you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff wrong.
Yeah, totally. But it might feel good someday. Okay. Before we wrap here, a couple fun questions about the year ahead. What are you most looking forward to on a Hivemapper basis, and then maybe more broad crypto tech on-chain world, what are you looking forward to in the next year?
So there's two things. I mean, look, I get very excited when people find new ways to use the map, right? I mean, I know all the ways that, existing customers want to, like the big macro use cases, like those are very obvious. But then there's also like, I think once you introduce a new product into the world that is so different than things that we previously have. I mean, the phone is, our smartphone is a great example of that. Like, who would have ever thought that like the primary mode of communicating between people would ultimately transitions from text or audio voice into pictures, right? And Snapchat came along and was like, hey, the way people actually communicate primarily is visually through pictures. That was only possible because you had this new sensor called the iPhone where you could do that with. And so I do think there's going to be new applications and new use cases for what we're building. And so I'm very excited to start to see some of that stuff unfold here. So that's number one. Number two is on the dash cam side. And, part of my other reason for the trip to our manufacturing facility was to start to build out kind of the next generation dash cam. We've learned a lot from these two models that we've had in there. So how do we take all those learnings and then package it up into something that is even better, make it easier for contributors, right? Make it better, even better from a positioning perspective, right? Push more and more of the compute stuff to the edge. Like, there's all these things that we want to go do. And, we now have the experience both on the software side and the hardware side. I mean, we had always the experience on the software side, but now we have a lot more experience on the hardware side to be able to go execute on a broader, ambitious level. In the crypto world, in the tech world, I just hope people keep their sanity. Maybe it's kind of just nature where you have these like boom and bust cycles. And I think it would be healthier for everybody is if they weren't so extreme in either direction. Because the truth of the matter is that there's, now with crypto and now with AI and now with some additional new platforms beyond just a smartphone, just beyond your computer, AR, VR and all that kind of stuff. There's just so many ingredients for smart people to come along and put into a recipe that creates a new compelling product experience. And there will obviously be a lot of failed experiments through that process, which is all natural. But I think if you like overhype everything, it hurts the entire industry because then the pain on the other side is going to be abrupt and it's going to be extreme. I mean, look, there's natural cycles to these things. That's just a reality of it. But what happens is like risk goes on and on and on and on. Like we turn risk on. And then when it comes off fast.
Yeah.
It goes, boom.
Yeah.
And then, there's carnage left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It leaves a wake of destruction that most people, it's like they didn't want to see it, right? Like they avoided the warnings, they FOMO'd in, and now they just want to point the finger at somebody else. And that hurts everybody because it labels the entire industry in a negative light. I mean, it's definitely an exciting time right now when the energy is high and people are feeling good. But it also, I feel like I'm seeing top signals everywhere because there's just so much frothing happening. And that really scares me. And I think our listeners know that we certainly preach patience and a very intentional approach to building a business, to investing, to however you approach anything in life, not just FOMOing into the next meme coin or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon people to ask, like, what is, I said it before, like, what is the utility value being created here for real businesses, for real consumers? And if you don't have a very crisp and clear answer on that, then I don't know, bad situation, red flag.
Two more questions before we wrap here. Just a personal fun question. I mean, you could answer this in a crypto blockchain way, but what's one thing you've purchased recently for under $100 that brings you joy?
That's a good question.
It's too bad the dash cam is more than 300. Otherwise you could see.
Okay, this is like very specific, but it's not a product. I guess it's a service. So I'm very into like transportation systems and obviously maps and whatever. And so LAX, for those of you who know LAX, you have to take a bus to a separate section of the airport. That's where you pick up your Uber or your Lyft car, right? it is a hassle, especially like when you've landed at the airport at like 11 p.m. or whatever it is. And then you have to like get on a bus with a lot of other people, whatever, like a big hassle. Or you can pay slightly more. So let's say like, you're going whatever to downtown LA or Hollywood or whatever. You can pay slightly more and get whatever, like the next grade up of the car. Like it's usually $20 more, $30 more, whatever it is. And in only those situations, if you pay a little bit more, will they come and pick you up curbside. And so I usually don't do this because I like freaking hate having to pay that extra $20 whatever it is. But I did it and I was like, oh my God, that was so much easier though. So I like splurged and I felt when I hit the button, I felt bad. But then, yeah, it definitely felt good.
But when you got in the car and didn't have to get on the bus, yeah, I'm sure.
I'm like, this is like a solvable problem, right? It was like the design and transportation system needs to solve this problem, which I think they're doing now. They have like an automated people mover type of train system.
Yeah.
But it's a solvable problem. And it's like, here now Uber's making 20 extra bucks to like kind of hack them.
Yeah. No, that profit should not be going to Uber. That's for sure. Okay. Last question. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people were going to see, what would you write on it?
Take more risk.
Good one.
Yeah. I think like the world has gotten to the state where taking risk in your personal life or your business life is perceived as like very negative or very scary or whatever. It's like we're now being fed, the media is full of a lot of fear porn, and that's being fed into our phones, fed into our brains constantly. And if you just do that, enough and enough, people be like, I don't want to take a risk. That's like bad. I don't want to start a company. I don't want to move to a different city. I don't like whatever. And anything that is slightly uncomfortable, the media is just consistently telling you that's bad, that's scary, high alert, all that kind of stuff. And none of that is true. Very few, very few. I mean, even commercial aviation, I don't think anyone has died in the US in commercial aviation in like 8 years. Okay. But now like the incident that Alaska Airlines had, everyone was like, oh my God, that's super scary, In the grand scheme of things, it is not scary at all, right? Yeah, I think it's like, how do you start to teach society to start to re-engage in more risky? I don't know. It's not even risk, but like just take risk. It's totally normal part of life, and it's a normal part of life to like try different things and fail at some of them and be like, oh, that's not for me, or like, oh, I learned this, and how do I apply to this other thing I'm about to do next, and whatever it is. Yeah, I think like up and down. I mean, my dad is a professor, so I know a little bit about like higher education and academia and all that kind of stuff. And like, they're part of the problem as well, quite frankly.
Yeah. It reminds me of the old saying, do one thing every day that scares you. Simple advice, but it can hold true power to just what that can impact your life, to just step outside your comfort zone. Whether, I think, like you said, risk doesn't have to be going all in on red at the casino. Risk can be just something that makes you uncomfortable on a day-to-day basis, but that slow progression, that slow change can make a big difference in the long run.
I mean, I saw this stat where it's like the number of people moving from cities in the United States is like at a record low. And look, people's economic opportunities are, in some cases being limited by those decisions. And a lot of it just comes down to that makes me uncomfortable. The idea of moving to this other city is very uncomfortable, and I'm not going to do it, right? And they've been taught, right, like at school, like trigger warnings, safe places, all this kind of stuff is exacerbating the problem. And it is okay to sometimes be uncomfortable, and that is totally normal part of life. And it's like, how do we get back into that? And I think that, I know you're in Canada, but I would say this, like Canada and America and many other parts of the Western world, one of the reasons they've done so well is they had these very innovative economies. Well, those innovative economies are dependent upon people taking risks, people challenging themselves, people moving to different cities to be around other people who are like-minded or interested in that specific industry or whatever it is. And if that starts to collapse, that's really bad for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. That was a nice shift away from our episode. I feel like we could keep going on a life conversation.
Hey, those are good questions. Those were like, I asked this question during interviews, which is, what's one thing you believe that very few other people believe? But now I'm the billboard one specifically, I'm going to potentially add that to my portfolio of questions.
Well, the billboard one came from Tim Ferriss. It was always one of my favorite podcasts. And he doesn't ask it anymore. He hasn't asked it in a few years, but he used to ask the billboard question, which I always found was one of the best nuggets from his podcast, because it's, dumb it all down into a few words. If you had a few words to share, what would it be? And it's always interesting to hear what people say. A lot of people express life advice. Not many people on the show. Some people take it as a marketing opportunity. They're like, Hivemapper, here's a QR code, buy a dash cam, right? But most people take it for the life advice, which is always refreshing.
Yeah.
This has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for the time today. Excited to see Hivemapper over the next year. Definitely, I'm going to look into a dash cam myself. I don't do a ton of driving, unfortunately, as I tend to stay at home I work from home and my family is at home, and I just drive to the ski hill. But maybe I'll be getting some honey soon. And I definitely encourage our listeners to check out Hivemapper. Grab a dash cam if you haven't already done so, because it's just so great to participate in opportunities to be part of these projects. And I think Hivemapper is going to be one of the big ones to watch this year.
Thanks, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Okay, everyone, thanks so much for listening, and everybody, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe or follow so that you don't miss the next one. While you're at it, there's a link in the description for our free newsletter where we provide timely and relevant Web3 insights so you can confidently build and invest in Web3. Make sure to subscribe today. One final note. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Crypto and Web3 are risky, and you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.